Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So in the last video we had a slight problem where we need to unset a value in order for our thing to run. So instead of having to do that, let's create a function that will do that on our behalf. So what that function will do is it's going to return a version of the array that only has what we need. So it will be something like this. I'm just going to say allowed columns like this is equal to okay, let me just call this one columns. So these are columns and I'm just going to add them here. Oh, I don't know, maybe let's call it array, AAR. Okay, so what I want to be able to do is supply this post in here. Okay, so I give it everything that is available in the post variable, but then it returns a clean version which I can put here, one that only contains what I need. But how do I know that this particular query has how do I know which one to get? So what I can do is put a comma here and put the name of the table. That way it knows that I'm trying to get the columns that are available only in the users table, and then bring them here and remove those that not match from here and return a clean version. Now this is all good. There are two ways we can know. It's very possible to run a query into this table and then retrieve all the columns that exist here and then check to see if any of them do not appear in the post and remove them. That's one way to do it. The only problem is there are times when you want certain columns to be uneditable. So for example, I may not want the date column to change even if a user supplies the date in here. I don't want the date to be changed when editing or something. So in that case, if we use the method where we just read from this and then get all of them, date will be part of those and it will override the date. So I want to be able to choose. I can have 10 columns in here, but I only want maybe the username to be editable. Then I can just put the username. So the best thing to do is just to tell it which columns you want. So here I'll create a function called allowed columns right about here in the functions page. So say function allowed columns like this. And so I'm getting two things. I'm getting the post data. So I'm going to call it post. Now keep in mind that this is not the post variable that has a underscore here. No, this is my post variable. So I'm just using that. It's not this one. So keep that in mind. This is just a variable. And then this one will have the table name. So maybe let me just call it data, just to avoid confusion, right? So data and the table. So here all I need to do is just say if table, okay? If table is equal to users, okay? If table is equal to users, then the allowed columns columns is equal to, so let's make an array of columns that we want. So we want the username to be editable. Let's put a comma. Now as I think after PHP 8 you can leave a comma at the end of an array. It's not a problem anymore, but if you're using lower versions, which you shouldn't be, then leaving a comma here at the end will be a problem. But username, email, and password is one of those. Also date and row. So let's do row and let's do date. So the order doesn't really matter as long as they're in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Image as well. I had forgotten that one. So let's put image as well. So all these columns we are saying are editable. So good. Now all we need to do is loop through this data. So here I will put a for each loop. So I'm just going to say for each data. So remember, this data is the post variable. In this case it's got items, so I'm going through it, and once I'm done here with this going through, I then return the new data, which is data like so. So I'm removing the items from data that I don't want. So let's see how we can remove those. So I'm just going to say for each key and value. So we check if the key is in here. So we'll say if not, I only care if it doesn't exist in the array. If not in array, so the function in array checks if a value is in array, is inside the array. So the needle is what we are looking for. In this case, we want to check if the key of the post variable exists in there. So and then the haystack is this function right there. So let's put that function right there. Boom. Right? So normally we're saying if it is there in the array, this will happen. But since we've put an exclamation point, this will only run if a key is not found in here. So if it's not found, remove it. So we'll say unset, just like we had done before, and we'll unset from data, and we'll unset that particular key like so. And simple and straightforward. So allowed columns, table users, boom, there we go. Very cool. Okay, so back here, let's give it another shot. Now keep in mind that I haven't unset anything here. All I've done is stored the allowed columns to clean things up for me for the users table, and then return what I want. Okay, so at this point, let's try and do another insert. So we'll insert the same data again. Since we don't have any data validation, this will work just fine. So password and password. So don't mind the duplicate entries for now. So I'm just going to click sign up. And as you can see, we didn't get any errors, which means it worked. So there we go. And there we go. You see, I've added this without having to unset things manually. Okay, so this means, let me try this out again. So I'm going to go back here and go back to where I have data so I can submit again. Now I want to give you a test here. I want to put more items here, just random data, A, D, F. So we're just imagining there's a whole host of data here that does not belong in the users table. So this is just noise that I've added to make sure that this function really does its job. So what I'm doing here is I'm not affecting the post variable, so I can still supply the post variable down here to another query function, and it too will get what it needs from there and ignore the rest. So this post variable is not affected, because when I unset here, where is this function in the allowed column, I'm unsetting a version that we supplied here, not the post variable itself, just a version of the array. So it's creating a new array that only contains what we need. So every query string will pick what it needs from the post variables, from the post variable, and use that in the query. Excuse me. So let's see if this works with all this here. So I'm going to sign up, and I'm sure we'll have a third. Okay, so it's working just fine. Very, very nice. So let's delete all that noise. We're doing great. Now another thing is I had to type a query here. So as you can see here, I'm typing a query and putting all this. This is unnecessary because it's always straightforward that I'm going to put this information inside. The insert query is always the same. You get whatever values are inside the array and you put them in this order. So why not just create a function that does this for us, right? So while we are still here, let's create another function down here, and we're going to call this function insert. That way we don't have to deal with queries at all. So all I'm going to do is say insert and tell it what table I'm inserting into. That's all. So say table right there, insert. Cool. And then once I do the insert, I have to give it the data I want to insert, of course. So data, and then the table I'm inserting into. So how will this thing work? So this thing will do the job of inserting for us. So in this case, I'm just going to cut the query and these allowed columns, right? Cut that. Oops. Actually, let me copy. I'll just copy for now and bring this into the function like so. So I know this works for the users table. So I'll say if table again is equal to users. Then let's run this code. Okay, so move this over there. So if table is equal to users, then do this. Now we don't have the post variable anymore, we have data instead. So I'll copy that and put it here. Boom. Okay, so we clean that data, put it here, and we are good to go. So now insert is this function. So we are doing exactly the same thing. So back here in the sign up, I don't need this anymore. I don't want to do queries anymore. So I'll remove this. I'll even remove the query itself. So all I'm going to do is say insert like that. And then I tell it where the data comes from and what table I'm inserting into, which is the users table. Simple. Well, we have reduced the code. We're not even using queries anymore at this point, and this will still work because once you do that, it's going to run the query, check what is allowed, and run the query. So just to be sure, let's try this again. Back. So keep in mind that there are 3 records here. So if we see number 4, then it has worked. So let me sign up again. I'm guessing things have worked. There we go. We have a 4th entry. So as you can see, we are building up slowly to this. Now, again, if you look at this, we can still optimize it further, believe it or not, right? So instead of having to check what table it is before creating the query, we can always create a query regardless. So what I'll do here is I can put this query run outside here. So because we know regardless what happens, we'll still need to run that query here, regardless the table name. But let's put the query outside as well so that there's always a query. The only part where we need to know the table is for this part, and so that we can put users there. But keep in mind, this table already has the data we need there. So all I need to do is copy this like so and put that table there like so. That means I don't even need to know what table it is in order to run this code. You see that? If I put the table directly, then it will give me exactly what I need. The only problem is this query is very specific to the users table. So let's deal with that as well. Let's create a better query that isn't specific. So we already know the table name, right? So let's use that. So we'll say query is equal to, and we'll say insert into, let's paste that table there, like so. Then let's add to the query now. So we've said insert into whatever the table is at that time. So all I want to do now is once I clean up the array, so I have this array that only contains columns that exist in the current table, right? So let me push that above this. Okay, that way I have this array. So all I'm going to do now is go through this array. In fact, what I need is a list of the keys from the array, right? These are the keys. That's what I put here. So luckily there's a function that does that. So say keys is equal to array keys. So what this array does is just gets all the keys from a specific array. In this case, this is the clean array, right? So maybe if you want to remember this well, we can name it clean array underscore array, just for you to remember what that is. So the clean array is the one that contains only the data allowed in this particular table. So once we get the keys from there, okay, we can now implode the keys. So we'll call this keys string is equal to, or we don't even need to do this. What I want to do is straightforward, add, because you see we need this format of a string right there. So what I'll do is add to the query. Let me actually move this above this so that once we start dealing with the query, we're dealing with the query. So we got the keys, but here what I want to do is add to the query. So I'll say query dot equals, which means add to, and then what I want is a bracket, okay, but then I want to add to this dot implode. So the implode function, what it does is it gets whatever items. Keep in mind that this keys is an array that contains only the keys from the clean array, which has key and value. So I'm getting these keys which represent this section and putting them here. So the glue is the separator, which is the comma. So I'm just going to do this, comma. So what will separate the values? Comma, like here. And what are the pieces? The pieces is the actual array here. So that's the keys. So I've added to the array this section, but I need a closing one and then put the word values and an opening one there. So I'm just going to concatenate like that, close the bracket, put values and open the bracket. Or if I want, I can leave it at that and close it. Okay, so I've added to the array. Now, since I've put values, I need another of this. Now, if you notice this is exactly the same as this. The only difference is that instead of a comma as a separator, it's a comma and a full colon, right? That's all it is, comma, full colon between these texts. But we have this at the beginning as well. So what I'll do is do that and put that one at the beginning, but then the rest I'm just going to use comma, full colon as a separator. So just duplicate this, exactly this I'm adding, but without, okay, actually maybe let me remove this just to be cleaner. I'll put it here instead. Okay, same thing, because I'm putting it there. Then the implode will just have a full colon next to it and the same keys as well, and then we'll close it. But then here we don't put values anymore because that's the end of the query. So what we've done here is created exactly this query, but in a dynamic way, because regardless what the table is, we'll be able to generate a query to suit that table. So then we don't need this query anymore. Out. Okay. So now that we have the perfect query here, we can send it in here and then use the clean array as the source. So let's try this and see if our insert function works. So this is a multi-purpose insert function. It will insert into any table as long as you name the table here, and you also need to have the allowed columns for that table. So that table should have this section as well. So currently only the users table has this, but that's all we need for now. So once we have this, then now we can go ahead. Let me go back and let's make sure we only have 4 records here, just to be sure. So if we see a 5th, then things are working. So click, there's number 5. So it worked without us typing a query anywhere. You see, very, very good. Now we're going to see how to use this a lot better. Once we have 2 tables, then you understand the power of what we've created here. Then eventually we'll convert this to OOP, so you understand why we did that, to make things a little bit cleaner. Okay, so I'll see